Let's call it a course. This is going to be a great resource for you when you really want to get into some heavy-duty layer masking inside of Topaz Studio 2, which is a phenomenal product for layer masking. It's really great, and I love it. Today we're looking at the brush tool as well as the layer mask adjustment. We'll call it a tool as well, but it's layer mask adjustments. So without any further ado, let's get started. If you watch the first three episodes, you are well on your way to becoming an expert using Topaz Studio 2 layer masking. All right. So again, I have this image up here, just a gray background with these white blocks on here. Just using it to demonstrate how this works. I added a color overlay filter, just like I did in the previous videos, and I'll just click the eyeball here so you can see. And it's basically what it did was added a magenta overlay over the entire image, and it's only at a 0.30 opacity, so not full opacity. So if I took it up the whole way, you wouldn't see anything. But I want us to be able to see our blocks through there. Let's take our opacity up a little bit more. Let's go up to about right around 70. Okay, so now we've applied this overlay filter over top of these blocks here. So again, if I click this eyeball here, you can see it without the overlay filter and with the overlay filter. Now let's click on the mask icon and we open up our layer masking tools right here. And right now we start out with a reveal all layer mask, okay? Now let's click on the brush tool because that's what we're working with now. So we're clicking on the brush tool. And we have a transparency slider, and I'll show you that in a second. But let's start out with the radius. Radius, if I adjust this to the right, can you see the brush here getting larger as I move this to the right and gets smaller as I move it to the left? Okay. And let's make it a little bit larger. And now watch the softness. Okay, so look at the red circle in the center. Okay, as I move this softness up, that red circle gets smaller and the outer circle gets larger. So we get a lot of feathering there. Now, I'm going to double click softness because it defaults at 0.50, and that's usually where I like to use it from. Let's take our radius and move it down, make it a little bit smaller brush here. And let's, for now, shut our edge wear off. I'll show you how that works in a little bit here. So let's shut that off for now. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, the transparency right now is set the whole way to the left at 0.00, and we have this black swatch here. So in effect, I'm painting with black paint on this layer mask here, which is going to hide whatever I paint over. And notice when I paint over this, see that red overlay? This is really nice because it puts an overlay over there as you're painting so you can see where you painted. When I let go of my brush, you can see it's hidden that overlay effect over that area right there, which is pretty cool, right? So there we've removed some of that overlay wherever I painted. Now, if I want to, I can take this transparency slider. Now, if I drag it the whole way to the right and make this block white, and if I paint here, I'll just paint all over the place and watch, nothing happens, okay? Except when I painted over the black area, it painted white over the black area. See, I'll show you again. Like if I paint over there, it'll remove it from there. So that's pretty cool. But then you can take this transparency slider. If I just wanted to remove some of the effect, but not all of the effect, I can move it somewhere, say, like around that 0.63. Now watch when I paint over here. You can still see some of that magenta overlay over the area that I masked out. Okay, so we can adjust this to different degrees here, and we may just want to take a little bit of the effect off certain portions of the image like that, which is pretty nice, right? So you have this transparency slider, so you can go to solid black and remove it completely, or you have any amount in between here the whole way up to white, which is nice. I'm going to leave it back on black. Now let's see how this edge wear works. Okay, so I have the edge wear off. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger, something like that. I'm going to turn my opacity up more now because you'll be able to see better how the edge wear is working if I increase this amount of overlay here a little bit with the opacity. Something like that. I'm going to paint first over this square right here. I'm going to paint over it with, it's going to be solid black paint without the edge wear on. Now check this out. I'm going to try to come near the edges here. Say I wanted to remove the effect from this square right here. Okay, now right now I don't have the edge wear on, so remember that. And I paint, and I want to make sure I get all the square, like right like that. as you can see, and look at this mask right here, and also look at this mask right here. See how messy it is around the edges here? Okay. And now let's come to this square up here. And now I'm going to turn the edge wear on. Let's do the same thing. So let's turn the edge wear on, and let me paint the same way. I'm going to paint here, and I'm splashing out over. I went a little too far down there on the bottom of the square. Something like that. Let's just paint in here, and let's look at the difference. Now look at that. Now I went a little bit too far down here, but look up here, it painted that perfect. And look at the square over here. So see what the edge of wear is doing? It's really protecting it. Now I could come back here and clean this up. The edge of wear is still on. I can take my transparency and move it up to the whole way up to white. So I change the swatch to white, and let's make my brush a little bit smaller. And let me like try to clean this edge up right along here. Let me just come across here and see if I can clean that. Yeah, and look how I cleaned that right up. I missed a little spot right there. I'll even go in there a little bit, but check that out. Isn't that cool? And then I could even come back here and clean this up. Like I can paint down there. And look, it cleaned that right up. But see where that edge wear technology works really nice. And this is a Topaz thing. I'll tell you what, it's really amazing. I went in there a little bit. Now I could change the black right there. So let's switch the transparency back to black and paint over here. And look, it fixed it right up. And now let's go back to white, and let me clean up this edge. Right down through here. Cleans it right up. Clean up this edge, come across here. I went a little bit too far in, and I missed a couple areas in here, so I could come over here and whoops, I'm wrong color, got to go to black. I'm glad you're seeing this mistake, because you can see you can fix it. Just paint right back over it. Any area that you missed, and voila, you're back. But look how that cleans it right up. So that's the edge wear technology. That is pretty cool. I just noticed I missed a couple spots right here, so I'm on black paint right here. Transparency is to 0. So I'm going to paint along this edge. My edge wear is turned on. Let me just clean up that edge there a little bit. Right there, and a little spot right here. Let's clean that up. That's pretty good. And out here, I could come to white. I overshot a little bit. Let's make my brush a little bit smaller here and just paint right along here. And look at that. That's good. Good. Oh, here's a little spot I missed. Got to switch to black paint. So slide this slider over to black and come to this edge here. Well, I overshot out there, but that's okay because I had a small brush. I think it's okay. Next, we're going to go and look at the adjustment tool, which is right here. So let's click on the adjustment tool. Let's tackle these adjustments one at a time. Let's start with density. When you take this density slider and you move it to the right, watch the black areas of the mask. They start to turn gray. Okay, and so in other words, when I start to move it to the right and they turn gray, they're letting more of the effect be put onto the darker areas that I originally had masked out to solid black, right? So you could fine tune with that. If you said, you know what, that's a little bit too strong of masking, I want to let a little bit of the effect back on, you can start to move this slider to the right and just tweak that a little bit, okay? Or if you take it from 0 and move it to the left, what happens is everything, the whole entire image starts turning grayer, and the effect is coming off the overall image. The black areas can't get any blacker, but the light areas can get more gray, and the effect is being removed off the entire image. And if I keep going the whole way to the left, I'll make the image totally black and totally remove the effect. So the density is really a good slider to just fine-tune the mask a little bit. Or if you wanted to let some of the overlay effect become lessened on the entire image, you could pull this density slider back to the left a little bit. So that's the way that works. So let me double click it. Next, we're going to look at the contrast slider. So when I move the contrast slider to the right, the masks become more contrasty. So the blacks become blacker and the whites become whiter. Okay? And you can see that there. See how the mask changes when I move that? Because when I move it to the right, the gray mask becomes darker. Okay, and more contrast comes to it. And it tends to get smaller in size when I move over. It kind of moves it in because it's adding contrast to the mask. So it's basically tightening the mask up. You see that. Now, once we're at 1, which is at the default setting, and I start moving it to the left, watch what happens. It gets less contrasty, okay? And it's kind of like the density slider. Things start to become less contrasty, but they become more gray, and some of the effect is being removed off the entire image. Now, something funny takes place here when I hit 0. Watch this. I don't really have a use for this, but once I hit 0, the mask turns, let's see if I can hit 0. I'm using my mouse here. There's 0. See how the mask is it's like a 50% gray. Now watch when I move past 0. Everything gets inverted, and I get the whole way over to -1. The blocks that were black are now white, and these lines that were black are now white. So the opposite has taken effect. I've inverted everything that I've done. So that's kind of weird, but just keep that in mind. That doesn't happen until you hit 0. And I don't really have a need for that. I'm sure I could come up with a need at some point, but right now I can't really wrap my head around why I would want to use that, okay? But think of contrast as tightening up your mask or making it less tight, a little looser, okay? So makes it looser when you move to the left, makes it tighter when you move to the right because you're adding contrast. Let me double click that. And the last thing we have is expand mask. Now watch these blocks here and everything on here, but the blocks you'll probably be able to see better because the edges are nice and sharp here. So watch when I move the expand to the right. It's actually contracting the mask. You would think it would be expanding it, but it's actually contracting it. See how these lines that were here moved into the left. Now watch when I come, let's double click it and get it back to the center. Now watch when I come to the left. It expands it. Can you see that right there? Black is crept out that way. So you can adjust the mask with the expand here. So you can contract it or expand it. And where that really comes handy is if you did something like a sky removal and you needed it to wrap tighter to the edges of things, you could contract your mask, or you might have to expand it a little bit if it wasn't quite sitting quite right, okay? If you're ever layer masking a sky, like a sky replacement, you'll understand what I'm talking about, okay? It's kind of hard to explain it right here, but that's what this expand mask does. It's really a cool feature. And the last thing I need to show you is feathering, okay? But everything's set back to default here. So the feathering is really cool too. So when I adjust the feathering to the right, watch everything here becomes feathered here. Now there's another thing here called edge aware feather. Right now it's set to off. I'll turn it on in a second, but right now it's off. So watch all these blocks here and the lines that I painted here. Watch when I move the feather to the right. They become softer. Everything becomes softer. See how things are bleeding here and becoming softer. And sometimes you need to soften a mask up a little bit to cause things to blend a little bit better. You may not want those real sharp edges there, okay? But check this out. I can take this feather. I'm going to move it the whole way to the right. And then I'm going to do something, and that is turn on this edge aware feather. And watch what happens to these blocks. They're magically going to become square again. They're not going to be softened on the edges. So check this out. Isn't that cool? And look at this area right in here. You can see the squares have come back in here. So the edge-aware feathering it's working with feathering, but it's using edge-aware technology on the feathering. That is pretty wild and crazy stuff. I don't use this that often, but it is there if you'd ever need it. Okay, so let me go ahead and shut this off, and let's double-click feathering, and that is the adjustments. They are pretty powerful. Next, we're going to work on an actual image with brush masking. If you've watched any of my tutorials in the past, you know how much I love to dodge and burn images, and brush masking is a great way to dodge and burn images. Now, I'll show you how I would do that. I would add a filter. I'm just going to add any old filter here. I'm going to add a curves filter. I'm going to put it in the screen blend mode for dodging. All right. I'm going to come up to the layer mask icon, click it, and I'm going to right click this layer mask icon. I'm going to invert it, putting a black hide all layer mask on here. I'm going to get a brush tool. I'm going to adjust my size. And I'm going to dodge some of these lighter areas of the tree in here just to show you how this brush masking works. So let's get a size here. I'll use a smaller brush here, something like around that size. And again, like I said, I usually like to use like the 0.50 softness. I'm going to shut the edge wear off. And I have, again, the screen mode, which is going to lighten things when I paint over them. So I'm going to paint, not with black paint, but I'm going to take this transparency slider the whole way up to the right. And I'm going to start out there. I'm going to find some light areas here and paint over them, like right here. Now that might be too light. So I can hit this undo button here, or I can hit Command or Control Z to undo it. But watch, I can take this transparency slider and alter it to maybe around like 50, somewhere around there. And let's make my radius a little bit smaller. And whoops, right around there. Now watch, I'll paint over these areas again. Like that. What? See how I can add some lightning effects here? And then if I wanted more, I could take this more up to the right and make this swatch a little bit lighter and maybe come over like an area like that. Maybe down in here, up in here. Let's paint a couple over here so they don't feel left out. And I'm just looking for areas that are light, and I'm just going to add a little bit more light to them. And dodging and burning is a great way to add depth and dimension to your images. I truly love it. But this is brush masking, and this is how I do it a lot of the times. There's many different ways and techniques of dodging and burning. And if you watch my tutorials, I'm sure you'll find all the ways I do it. Okay, so let's click, and you can see my little strokes here. So let's click the eyeball here. Here's the before and here's the after. Isn't that cool? And if you felt you went too far, just click on this curves layer and take this opacity, take it off, and then just slowly build it up till it looks kind of natural. But that's really cool. Now here's how I would burn. I would come and add another filter. I'm just going to go ahead and grab another curves filter. I'm going to change it from normal blend mode to the multiplied blend mode, which darkens everything. And now I'm going to come up here again and click on the layer mask icon. I'm going to invert it, right click it, invert it, and again get my brush tool, and again get a smaller radius here. Now I'm going to find areas I want to darken, and of course I have to change my transparency to a lighter shade, maybe somewhere around like 0.48, and I'm going to darken some areas like this. See how I darken that up? Isn't that cool? And this is called burning. Now I can make my brush larger here, and I'm going to paint on the shadow across the road right here. I'm going to take the transparency and move it more to the left because I don't want it to get real dark, but I'm doing a sloppy job, and I'm just going to paint across there. See that? I darkened that so I can come over here and darken some things in here. Maybe this whole section right in here I want to darken up a little bit. Make my brush smaller, and maybe come into some of these areas of the tree in here. And don't you like how you can see that overlay right there so you can see where you're painting? Which I love that. Okay, and I don't know, maybe some areas right in here. Now I went a little bit too strong there, so if I did go too strong there, I can come and take this transparency back even more, and watch, I can paint over that area again and fix that right up. Okay, so let's come up to the curves layer right here and click on this and come to the opacity, and let's take that opacity off, and then let's slowly build it up to where it looks kind of natural. So let's click this eye now. So there is the before and there's the after. Isn't that cool? So that's dodging and burning, and that is one way of using brush masking. So, but I use it for all kinds of things. I use it if I'm doing impressionistic paintings and I want to remove a small amount of the impressionistic filter off of certain parts of the image or whatever. I'll use it for that. And there's just a myriad of uses for brush masking inside of Topaz Studio 2. And again, as I said, this layer masking capability in Topaz Studio 2 is some of the best in any kind of software out there today. It's really fantastic. So go back and watch these videos again, and you're also going to have them as a resource if you need some brush up. If you forget something, you can go back and watch some of these again, and they're there for you. And there it is. Well, we're at the end of Layer Masking 101. I hope this is a valuable resource for you. As I just said, go back and watch some of these things again, you may have to, and they're here for you if you need them. If you enjoyed this video today, please give it a like and share it with your friends. If you're not yet a subscriber of my channel, please subscribe and click the bell notification icon, and then every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll be informed about it.